I am Sue Grogan. I started my time at Shades Cahaba as the principal in 2000. I had that position for 13 years until my retirement in 2013.
Welcome to the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project. I'm your host, Sean Wright.
In 1988, I was hired to be a part-time guidance counselor. Homewood City Schools decided that they needed guidance counselors on the elementary level. So 3 of us were hired, 1 for each of the 3 elementaries, and I was fortunate to be placed at Shades Cahaba. So for 6 years, I was the guidance counselor, moving from part-time after the first year to a full-time position there. And I got kind of bitten by the administrative bug and encouraged to do some ed leadership courses. And so I went back and got my certification in administration. And in year 7 at Shades Cahaba, I became what was then called an instructional support position, but it became the assistant principal position. I did that for 6 years, loved that opportunity of being able to work with teachers as well as children in the instructional program. And then Karen Delano, who was our principal at the time, left Homewood to move to another area school district. And I threw my name in the hat, and I was named the principal. And I was in that position for 13 years. So I have been at Shades Cahaba 25 years, up until 2013 when I retired. It's hard to believe that I was there 25% of the time that Shades Cahaba has been open.
Wow, when you put it that way.
Yes, yeah.
I talked to Dr. Lowry. He was our first episode, and we kind of kicked things off and went through the years, and he kind of gave us an overview of what Shades Cahaba is like today for the people who've not been keeping up with Shades Cahaba and might have been gone for years and years like that. And we talked about becoming a National School of Character, which was earned in 2006 and 2012. And both of those were under your watch. What did you have to do to earn those prestigious awards?
Well, I cannot take much of the responsibility for that.
You can take a lot.
I was fortunate to be able to work with wonderful, wonderful teachers and parents who sent their children through the doors of Shades Cahaba every day with the wish that not only would they be educated academically, but they would be taught right living. I had a group of young teachers that after they kind of got their feet wet in the classroom and had a good rhythm with their instruction, began to talk about what they were seeing with the young children of the time.
The good and the bad?
Yes, absolutely. Those children that were making good choices and those children that from time to time, as all children do, make a choice that would serve them better if they had chosen something else. So they came to me and said, we would really like to start a character education program, an intentional one. Now, all schools, all good schools, have rules and expectations and an interest to raise children that make good choices and that are strong characters. Respectful, responsible children. But I really appreciated these young teachers coming and saying, I think there are some things that we can be intentional about. That's how it started, from the grassroots, and that's when things are very effective in the life of a school, is when it's not top down, but when it comes from the folks that are working with those children 8 hours a day in a classroom. About the same time, Melinda Hollingsworth, who is the extended day director, also came to me and voiced some of the same interest of helping children make good choices after school. She had them from 3 until 6 in our extended day program. She brought a list of they're not rules, they are expectations, they are cornerstones from a previous experience that she had had working with children. We took a look at them, kind of tweaked them a little bit, and they became our Shades Cahaba Way. 6, like I said, expectations. The thing that is different about them is that they are very positive. Things like take charge of yourself, you're responsible for you. Avoid put downs, who needs them? The last one is have fun. Life is a gift, and that is not usually a school rule. And I think when we started having that common language, the children grasped it, embraced it, the faculty and staff embraced it, the parents embraced it, and then it started feeding out into the community. That's the first place that we started with our intentional common language through the Shades Cahaba Way, and then it just took off from there. There are so many examples of how the character education program flourished at Shades Cahaba. One incident or one example, our custodial staff embraced the Shades Cahaba Way, and rather than calling them the custodial staff, we call them the caretakers, which is a nice, welcoming title for them because they certainly took care of not only the building but all of us.
And it's certainly empowering.
Yes. And then we gave them the responsibility of naming a best nest classroom once a week. That classroom that intentionally took care of their room. They'd pick up trash. They would keep their desk in order, put their chairs up so that the caretaker could come in and clean the floors easily. And then they had a banner that they could hang outside their door as the best nest. So everybody embraced it in their own way, and it just it became systemic and culture changing for us.
What I heard you saying, and something that I embrace through adult leadership training with Boy Scouts, is the bottom-up leadership style, and about how things tend to work better when you empower others and it lifts to the top. And was that something new, or is that kind of something that you've always done?
Well,
easier said than done.
Yes. I decided after my first year of being principal, and even though I'd been in the building at that point in time, 13 years, I had never held that position of leadership. And I wanted to make sure that I was intentional with the choices that I made when I was expecting everyone else to be intentional with their choices. I decided that I needed not a management team, which is very common in school associations and school buildings, but I needed a leadership team. I told my faculty and staff that I was happy to do the management part of the job, but because it was not just my school, it was our school, that I needed people with vision of where they wanted this place to go for children. And so at the end of my first year at a faculty meeting, as we were wrapping up the year, I asked them to vote for 6 teacher leaders, teachers that they felt like would lead our school in a positive place. Organizations don't just stay the same. They either decline or they improve. And I wanted our story to be that of improvement. So they elected 6 teachers, and we added a staff member, a support staff member, and we added a parent on that visionary team. We renamed ourselves instead of leadership team. We named it visionary. We had our own mission statement. I made sure that everyone realized that if there was a problem with the ice cream box in the lunchroom line or the gym floor, they needed to come to me and not bother the teacher leaders about that.
Right.
But if they had an idea of how to make instruction better, or the culture of the school better, that's who they needed to approach. One of us that was on the visionary team.
It's not necessarily even these are bad things happening. It's more of I see a better way of doing this.
Or let's add one more thing, or let's change one thing that can get us to that goal that we have of being an even better place for children who come every day and for teachers and staff who come every day. And because of that, then we started making goals. We would have an academic goal a year that all of us would work toward. It might be math, it might be science, it might be language arts. But we also had a goal that was something about our culture. And then we put a little bit of money behind that. So that we could support it financially, and we'd have some resources that we could use or some professional development that we could use. So when you start putting all those components together, where you've got the voice of faculty and staff and parents and children, and you have goals that you write, and then you put some money behind it and some effort behind it, wonderful things happen.
I think that's almost the legacy of Shades Cahaba. When you go back and you look at the history and you look at how it got started because of parents who were like, there could be a better school system on this side of the mountain. You know, once it got started, they were able to predecessor of the PTA, and the PTO was the School Improvement Association.
Yes.
And they put some money into it for accreditation. And when the Depression came, the city got behind it and put money into it to keep it open. And you see that story all throughout the years. And,
yes.
You know, even when we started the school system in 1970 and all that. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in telling the stories, because there's a whole lot that's been going on, and there's so many people who've been pushing it from behind the whole way.
Right. One of the first things that I wanted to do when I became principal, and I was scheduled to talk at our first PTO meeting, where we usually had 500 or 600 folks attend. And I wanted to talk about the legacy of the school, because there are not many schools that have the kind of legacy that Shades Cahaba has in a community like Homewood. I thought I was so fortunate to have landed there. And I had met some of the alumni that had attended when it was a high school, and the stories that they told were just wonderful. So I took some of those stories that I had heard at their annual high school reunion. I would attend that from time to time, really just to kind of be the person on staff to open the doors, yes, and make sure the air conditioner was running and all of that. But I always took the opportunity to go and talk to them. And one of the ladies, who was well into her 90s, said that she attended the school the first year that it opened. She talked about what a wonderful opportunity it was to go to a school in the valley, she said, and that it opened the world to so many folks that otherwise would not have been able to attend. And then she had wonderful stories about the trees that the Arbor Society of Shades Cahaba High School planted, and she showed them to me. She talked about riding her horse to school and where she would have to make sure that the horse was tied up appropriately, and that her baby brother had attended with her. And I asked about him, and I think at the time he was 94, her baby brother. So just wonderful, wonderful stories.
And I'm guessing you're speaking of Helen Cockrell.
I certainly am.
When I asked Dr. Lowry what I needed to ask you when I came to interview you, he said make sure you ask her about the stories that she would talk to Helen Cockrell about, and about her time in school here. And Helen Cockrell graduated in the 1923 class.
Yes.
So, and we opened up in 1920. First
Correct.
Graduating class was 21, but the class of 23 proclaims themselves as being the first graduating class because they came all the way through.
Yes.
So,
and she was very proud of that, and talked about how wonderful the instruction was, but also how wonderful the opportunities were. She was on the women's basketball team.
Oh, then I have a photo of that. It's a great photo from 1923.
Okay. Well, she was a tall lady, and she talked just with eyes sparkling about her time of being on that basketball team. One of my favorite stories also, I was working one Sunday afternoon. No, it was a Saturday afternoon at the school trying to catch up a bit. I had been principal probably for 2 or 3 years, and I was the only one in the building at the time. I heard someone knocking on the door, the front door. My office was kind of around the corner, so I didn't have a sight line to see who it was. And I thought it was probably some of the kids that were out playing soccer on the field, and they just wanted to come in and get a drink of water. So I get up from my desk and I go, and there is a middle-aged couple at the door. And when I answered the door and asked, "May I help you?" the gentleman said, "Well, I know this is odd, but we saw a car out in front of the school. My mom is aging and in her 90s. She attended Shades Cahaba High School. And shortly after she left Shades Cahaba in Birmingham, she moved to Atlanta, and she has lived there the majority of her life. But she has asked that we take her on a memory tour of the Homewood area. And one of her requests is to come to Shades Cahaba. And is it okay if we just walk around the outside?" I told him, "No, you must come in." And so for the next hour and a half, this wonderful lady with all of her broken memories and her son and daughter-in-law spent some time with me. Of course, the building had been changed, it had been added on to, it had been renovated. There were not a lot of things that she remembered. But I thought, I'm going to take her to a few things and see if she remembers them. So we walked out to the courtyard where there are some stone steps kind of in a circular pattern. And we went out there, and I said, "Do you remember this area? It is now a garden for us, and we do some outside instruction here. But do you remember this? This might have been the way that you came out of school or came into the school." She said no, she didn't remember it. I then took her to the auditorium, and around the stage area are rosettes that go up on either side and across the top. And I believe that they are from the original building. I said, "Do you remember this?" She said, "No, I don't." We also have 2 plaques on either side of the auditorium doors that are in memory of those Shades Cahaba students who died in World War I and World War II. I showed her those, asked her if she might remember that. She said no, she didn't. At that point, her son was a little disheartened that his mama was not remembering. I said, "I have one more thing that I want to show you." So we go out what is now the back door of the school. And you have to kind of go all the way out the sidewalk to the steps that are going down to the circular street. And if you look back up on the building, there is the owl, a 4-foot concrete owl on top of the building. I said, "Might you remember that?" And she brought her hands up to her face. Her eyes glowed. She said, "Oh, I do. As a matter of fact, go red, go black, push 'em back, push 'em back." I said, "Were you a cheerleader?" And she said, "I sure was." And that was our cheer.
That's great.
Isn't that a wonderful story?
It really is. That is. You know, it's funny, the steps that you took her to, she probably had her class picture on those steps.
Probably.
Because most every class picture I've seen, they're all sitting there, at least the group ones. If they're not there, they're in the front with the owl in the background.
So there's just story after story about that. One of the gentlemen at the reunion group was talking about the principal back in the day. I guess it was Mr. Ward.
James Ward.
And probably the majority of those were the high school, maybe
Yes,
all of
they
them
were all
were
high
high
school
school years.
But they did, there was a point, he was principal when they brought in the elementary school kids and put them under his administration,
Yes.
which had been in the late 20s, I think.
Yes. So, but he was talking about Mr. Warden, what a wonderful man he was, and what a wonderful principal he was. And I think there were times when he was a teaching principal that he taught a class or two.
And his wife taught there.
Yes, yes. So, being a fairly young administrator at the time, not young in age, young in my experience, I said, will you please tell me what it was that he did that endeared you to him, and that you remember about him, and that he did to make this place a great place to come every day, because I would like to be that kind of principal. And this gentleman said, well, I don't remember much of what he did, but I do know that he came in our classroom every morning, early morning, and asked what we would like to have for lunch. And I said, oh, so he did the lunch count personally? He said, oh, no. He would get the ideas of what the kids would like to have for lunch, and then he took the truck and went into Birmingham and bought the food for that day and came back and gave it to the staff that was preparing the meal. And he said what a sacrifice that was for him every day. Now, I don't know that he would have done that every day and gotten his principal job done.
Well,
but what a lovely memory that is.
I will tell you that we do have a special episode coming up for the lunchroom ladies. And
Great.
we talk about the lunchroom manager from the 30s through the 50s. And we tell a little story about that, because getting the food to the high school in the early years especially was pretty difficult, because
Yes.
nobody would deliver over the mountain, and it wasn't like driving through the Red Mountain Expressway. It was an ordeal to go
Right.
to Birmingham. So.
And you know, there's an archway in the hallway that is closest to Highway 31, and that was a pull-through driveway at one time.
Oh, really?
Or I had been told that back in the day, that's where they would pull the food truck in after they had picked the food up.
Wow.
How about that?
I like that.
Yes.
I like that. Well, I'll give you a little hint. They actually served the meals in the chemistry lab.
Oh, interesting.
That was the only place they could
I did
do
not know that. Well, when you do that episode, please don't leave out the time that we redid our kitchen, and all the food was prepared over at Homewood Middle School, the old Homewood Middle School kitchen before they tore it down. They saved that part of the building, and we used it for about 3 months and brought all of the food over from.
Well, that's exactly what happened this past year at the high school. They renovated the high school, and I guess late winter, early spring of this year, they shut down the lunchroom, and they actually brought in food from the middle school.
Yeah. So, you know, some things never change.
Yeah.
They look a little different,
Yeah.
but they don't change.
But we've got some good things on that. We tell a little story about how the cafeteria changed, who the people were. I've got a special guest. We have a couple of recipes from the lunchrooms, one from the Shades Cahaba and one from the high school.
Great.
I don't know when that's
The big
coming
good one.
up. That's
Yeah.
going to be my filler when I'm trying to fill in with all
Yeah.
the other people.
Good.
You spent a lot of time with Helen Cockrell, who, by the way, she was 106 when she died in
She was.
2013.
I guess it was probably 2008 or 2009 when we were able to go and visit her. She was homebound at the time. I certainly visited with her a lot when she was still able to come to the reunion. But that became a difficult situation for her, and then she became homebound, so we went to her home, and she welcomed us and told us a lot of stories. Another story that she told was about remembering hanging on a fence of the school, welcoming the troops, the boys, she said, who had gone to war, who were parading, marching down what is now Highway 31 as they were coming home. And how wonderful it was, because so many of the friends that were students had gone to war. And it was quite a female-dominated school for a few years.
Right.
And how wonderful that was.
And there's a really good picture that will show up maybe on the blog or somewhere, and it's a picture of women, children, and a couple of men, and they're actually working on the sidewalk that goes, if you're looking at the owl door, it goes to the left and kind of goes around up high by the gym to that door. And that was built in 1944, and it had been a muddy path and all that, and they needed to replace it. And I guess the Jefferson County school system said, we'll give you the money, we just don't have the people to do it. So the parents actually went out and laid that and put in poured the concrete and everything, because everybody else was off to war and they had to kind of do it themselves.
Wow, That's a good story. Well, the plaques that I mentioned before, one of them says the World War on it. The other one says World War II. I would always bring my fifth graders who were beginning to study world history a bit more, and I would ask them, how come this one says the World War and doesn't say World War I? Man, that was a puzzle to them until they realized that plaque was put up before World War II happened. And so they thought that would be the only World War.
And that plaque was put up at the dedication of the school about 2 weeks before it opened up in September of 1920. They had a whole ceremony, and I think the governor might have been there. The president of the University of Alabama was there, and some others, and they dedicated that at that point.
That's great.
And we found another plaque. I saw a picture of it, and Dr. Lowry found it in his office leaning up against the wall. It was probably there the whole time you were there. But it was for some World War II veterans. It was a smaller one. It's not as big. But it had, and I think they probably put that up in 1947 for the people who had died in combat.
It's a place of history, for sure.
One of my favorite things is the underpass.
Tunnel.
No, it's the underpass. That's my goal now. I'd completely forgotten that it was called the underpass, and somebody mentioned it online, and I thought, okay, that's my goal now, is to get everybody to start calling it the underpass again. But
good luck.
It's going to happen. Somebody mentioned one of their biggest memories of Shades Cahaba was painting the tunnel.
Yes.
Was that during your time there?
Yes.
What's the story on that?
Well, we were beginning to have problems with graffiti. Of course, that is just a draw for somebody that would like to spray paint something in public, because you can do it very secretively at night. One of the jobs that I asked Philip Garner, who was the employee that helped us with the building and as far as maintenance or construction plans and that kind of thing, I always ask him, will you please check the tunnel or underpass every morning before the kids walk to school, in case there's something that needs to be covered up. Right. And it was not uncommon. It wasn't frequent, but it wasn't uncommon for him to have to have a can of paint where he would paint over a word or a piece of artwork that wasn't quite right. So, going back to the Shades Cahaba Way, Mary Jane Coker was our art teacher, and we started brainstorming some things that we might be able to do to turn that into a piece of art that might discourage folks from defacing it. So
you're going to make them feel bad.
Possibly.
Nice. I like that.
So the art club at the time, she had a group of fourth and fifth graders who did special projects in the community or at the school, and they did their research on appropriate artwork, large, bold pieces, not intricate, but kind of a folk art look that would be easy to paint on concrete and in a tunnel, and bright colors that would discourage folk from doing harm to those walls. So I guess it took probably 2 or 3 Saturdays for them to go and outline the design that they had planned and then to paint it. It was a real boost, and everybody had to, even if you didn't walk that way home, or if you were a car rider, everybody had a chance to go and take a look.
Right. I remember it well, and I was an adult without any kids in the school at that time, so I think it made a big impact on some of those kids, and I'm using air quotes here, kids who got to do it, who are now adults, and
I think so.
I think they miss it, to be honest. But I have to say, I do like the lights. We have lights in there.
Yes.
It seems relatively clean for a 50, 60, 70-year-old tunnel.
Yes.
And it's, as another one of my friends pointed out, there's nothing like when it was dark and just screaming through there on a bicycle and hoping you didn't hit anything.
Right, exactly. Those grates on either side and at the bottom were a little bit bumpy.
That'll wake you up.
Yeah, it will wake you up.
Yeah. My kids always wanted to walk through the tunnel, and with Ethan especially, I'm like, we live on this side. I can't drive you over there just so you can walk through the tunnel. But I walked home most every day through that, so it always made a big impact on me. I love those stories. That's one of the reasons why I love doing this. And I hear all these just little tidbits, and I think it's resonating with other people as well, because it brings back memories. And today is the 27th. It's Friday the 27th, and in just 2 weeks we're going to have our 100th anniversary celebration that the PTO is putting on.
Yes.
And we have a timeline in the hallway. We've got all sorts of wonderful little things and a band that's playing, and we're starting to hear from people who are just getting the word, and we're hearing from people who are bringing their grandparents who came to school here, and they really want to show up. And I know the PTO's got kind of a simple layout that they're going to take people around, but I have a feeling we're also going to be taking people off to other parts of the school as they get here, when we find out that, they graduated 80 years ago. Okay, well, let me tell you a few things. Part of this interview, I wanted to tell everybody about the 1940s. We talked about before the school started, we've done the 20s and the 30s, and I thought I'd kind of go through some of the highlights of the 1940s. And you may be aware of some of these. Shades Cahaba was the only school in the state that had an athletic field with lights, speakers, and an electronic scoreboard, which was just mind-blowing to me. And if you can imagine the field, the little hill over there that goes along Ponciana was all concrete bleachers. They had fixed those in. They had metal and wooden ones, I guess, on the other side of the field. And then we had lights. And Herb Griffin was telling me some stories about how there were games that were played at Shades Cahaba for other schools or events or things like that, because we were the only ones who really kind of had all that technology. And back in the 40s and the 30s, the school had high academic success, but they also had pretty good athletic teams. And after football season, I'm going to sit down with Jake Collins, and we're going to talk about the football program and the baseball and the basketball, and Piggy Mitchell, who was the coach at the time, and tell those stories.
They talk about Coach Piggy so much at those reunions.
Yeah, he really made an impression.
He made
on
a
a lot
huge
of people.
impression.
And he was there from the 20s all the way. He went to Shades Valley when they became, the high school there. So he was around for a long time. And I think he was also a teacher or an assistant principal, maybe.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know. I've just heard about his coaching.
And then in the 1930s, even though they kept the schools open, the one nice thing about Shades Cahaba and Homewood and surrounding communities was they funded to keep all the Homewood schools open, Edgewood, Shades Cahaba, Rosedale, for 9 months every year. But it took its toll in the schools, and they came back in the 40s, and they did a complete renovation and repair job. They put in central heating system, which are the radiators, which were there when I was there, put in fluorescent lights, and they got money from Jefferson County and also the local civic groups as well, put in money to fix that up. Now, this will blow your mind here. The student population in the 40s was well over 1,000 students. I've heard 12 to 1,400. Now, think about that.
Good grief.
That's I
don't know how.
So the gym was not there, I don't believe. That whole hallway, that fifth grade hallway was not there. But I believe the U and that extension over on the side were there. But you had just over 500 kids there right now. Mm-hmm. And they're probably packed to the gills. Dr. Lowry said he saw pictures of classrooms with 38 and 40 kids in it.
I was going to say, probably every class had 40 or more.
And no air conditioning.
Yes. You always wanted to sit by the window.
Oh, wow. And that's in the 40s was when, obviously, when the call came out for we've got to have a new high school. We got to do something. And they started trying to figure out how to handle that. And that's when the wheels started rolling for Shades Valley High School to be started. Now, in 1949, after the new high school was built, they chose the name Shades Valley High School. but a lot of the students really wanted Shades Cahaba. The Homewood City Council and several civic groups passed resolutions requesting the name be continued. You can see it right now. I can see people doing that.
Yeah.
But the county refused. Shades Valley High School did, however, continue the team name of the Mountaineers when it opened in 1949. And at that point, it became strictly an elementary school. At the time, the principal was R.B. Nichols. He took over from James Ward, and it became R.B. Nichols. And R.B. Nichols actually stayed with the elementary school. And the podcast that's out right now with Don Harbour, he talked about how R.B. Nichols was such a wonderful man. He was like this mountain of a man, and he was huge, but he loved kids and loved going in to read to the kids and things like that. So looking at that, you could see how he wanted to stay with the little kids.
Sure.
And also there was plenty of room at that point. And in 1949, during the switch from the high school to the elementary school, the concrete owl was removed. And no one knows why, and that's what we're trying to figure out. That pretty much was it. The 40s is when the high school ceased to exist at Shades Cahaba. And for the next, if I'm doing my quick math here, 70 years, it's been an elementary school,
Yes.
Which is where we are today. So, all right. So here's my memories. When Aiden started Shades Cahaba, we had the kindergarten popsicle party.
Yes.
So we're all staring at each other, wondering what we've got ourselves into. Why are we here? What's this going to mean for our lives now that we're in kindergarten? And you came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and you said, "I don't know if you remember me or not, but I was your youth counselor in the church group." And the first thing that went through my head was, "Oh no, I've ruined it for him already."
You didn't have to worry about that. Of course, that was during your teen years.
Yeah,
now, Sean.
yeah, I know. That's why I was worried. So it's like great. That's my first Shades Cahaba round 2 memory.
There you go.
Was that.
There you go. And there's a lesson to be learned in that to share. With young folks. Be careful about your teen years because you never know how they're going to come back and haunt you, right? Or who's going to come back and haunt you.
Well, I will say that when I interviewed Dr. Cleveland earlier this week, I'd called my brother who was the same age, and they went through the same class and Shades Cahaba and everything, and said, "Do you have any stories on Dr. Cleveland I could, ask him about?" And he told me one story, and I thought, no, I'm not going to ask him about that and get it on the record. Well, he alluded to it, basically saying that basically you can bounce back from bad things. So,
yes.
So he had a good thing there. So
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
I appreciate you taking your time to get away from the lake and come over here and talk to me. And just thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. It is always such a pleasure to be able to reflect back on those years. They were wonderful years for me. Wonderful children, wonderful teachers, wonderful staff, wonderful parents, a community that supported everything that we did, wonderful Board of Education that helped us make everything happen. I have often said it was the glory days in my mind. I'm sure every principal feels that way when they look back. But I was so very blessed to be a part of it, and I am thrilled that the blessings are continuing for all of the children that walk through those doors every day. It's a great place to live and learn.
But I'm guessing retirement's not so bad.
It's not. I'm enjoying that too.
You can subscribe to the Shades Cahaba Oral History Project at Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcasts. And you can also listen directly on our website at shadescahabahistory.com. Now, if you love listening to this podcast, please leave us a review at Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about the show. The Shades Cahaba Oral History Project is sponsored by SeanWrightArt.com. Yep, that's me. When you go there, look for the link to Shades Cahaba, and you'll find shirts and accessories featuring the exclusive Shades Cahaba Centennial Logo. This logo is based on an image on the cover of the OWL yearbook back in the 1920s. It's been updated to celebrate the 100 years of the school, and it helps us to offset the cost of producing and publishing this podcast.